So now we'll officially start. Welcome everybody. So in thinking about this topic, as I was mentioning before I started the tape, and we don't say tape anymore. I say tape. I said that once and somebody says, tape? What are you talking about? So, and before I started the video, is kindness is really touches on everything in MBSR. But not everybody thinks so. You know, when you hear people talk about kindness, in the article I mentioned before I started rolling, is called Why Mindfulness is Not a Good Thing. And the author says, this is what the author says. He says, mindfulness cultivates mental strength, brings clarity and feels pleasant, but just as effectively as it can enhance the healing touch of a doctor, it can also heighten the murderous intent of a cool-headed terrorist. You know, something just seems wrong about that, right? You know? But, you know, where it comes from is if you take the definition of mindfulness really literally, the definition that Jon Kabat-Zinn always used to use, he would say that mindfulness is paying attention to the present moment on purpose and non-judgmentally. Well, you can imagine a sniper could do that. If it's about concentration, a good sniper would do that. In fact, if you're in your training, if you get trained to do that for the military, you're trained to follow your breath, so you know when to pull the trigger. So those guys, as far as concentration, they have that down. And you could argue that I actually had a conversation with the Army when I worked with them a few months ago about that very fact, because they took a little bit of ejection when I talk about cold-blooded snipers, and they said, well, you know, they're protecting our people. They're protecting if they're in a hostage situation, they're protecting the hostages. You know, it really isn't as cold-blooded as you say. But if it's just about concentration, it could be. You could have perfect control of your breath, of your mental state, and yet have no sense of empathy for anybody else. And I've been in conversations with other mindfulness instructors who try to argue their way out of this and say, well, if it's about paying attention to the present moment, then the non-judgmental is not just about your own state, but it's also about what's going on. So they kind of wrap themselves around like pretzels trying to explain it. And never really very successfully, I don't think, although there's some argument that can be made that's enough to be present, that compassion can come out of that. But I think maybe it begs the point, you know, that maybe it's better to acknowledge that we'd like that to be a part of the practice, to be inclusive, to be relating to other people. We think of it as being that way. That's why it sounds so wrong when you talk about somebody who's a cold-blooded killer being mindful, because we think of it as having that component. An argument can be made that the golden rule, which is pervasive, every religion has its equivalent of the golden rule, do unto others, that it's two ways to look at it. Well, it's there because it has to be, because people are really self-centered and selfish, and then you need somebody to say, or some structure to say, you must be kind to other people. But there's another argument that says the reason it's in all major religions and contemplative traditions is not because it has to be put there, but because it's a universally desirable state to be kind. And you think of when somebody does a heroic action, they put themselves aside to do something for somebody else. You know, we admire people like that. And even animals, I understand. I just found this article, 6 Amazing Way Animals Show Compassion, by a primatologist, Frans de Waal, and he chapters and verse the different species and how they're actually kind to each other in various ways. In the videos, I took a clip from Jamie Derrick's presentation that she did on kindness, which she called Be Kind Always. If any of you ever corresponded with Jamie, at the end of her emails, for the last 8 or 9 years, it says Be Kind Always. And I always thought that was brilliant. And she did that sort of, in the video you'll see, she did that as a personal practice. And she just recently, in the last week, put a tagline on the tagline, because people object to Be Kind Always. Well, can you really be kind to everybody? If someone's doing you harm, you don't want to be kind to them, do you? And if you need to protect yourself, are you going to be kind to somebody who's trying to hurt you? And she realized there needed to be something else below that, because kindness works. It's not just be kind to other people. You're in the equation also. If someone's doing harm to you, it may be difficult to figure out how to be civil and kind to somebody who would otherwise do you harm. And if that's not possible, you may need to just protect yourself. So her tagline now says, Be kind always, be fierce as needed. Because there are times when kindness can manifest as fierceness. You've seen somebody who stands up for somebody who's been taken advantage of, or being hurt physically or emotionally. That takes courage to do that, and it takes a certain level of fierceness to do that. And it's an art and a practice to figure out how to do that in a way that's not itself violent. That respects everybody involved. So it'd be easy to keep talking about this, and I'll stop here in just a minute. Next month we'll talk about belonging and wholeness, which is kind of an extension of this idea of being kind to one other person. So we'll start with a meditation, and I've got a way to turn these lights out. It's just making yourself comfortable. In this meditation, like the others we do in the graduate groups, the first part of it will be guided and will be related to the topic, and the second part of it will be completely unguided. It'll be silent. And so you can either continue on with the theme from the first part, or just let it make it your own meditation, because actually it is your meditation, all of it, including the part where I'm talking. You don't have to listen that closely to me necessarily. It's your meditation. So just noticing how it is sitting here. Noticing how your feet are making contact with the floor. How it feels to be sitting in the chair, or if you're on the floor. And there may still be things sort of bubbling up from the day, and just acknowledging that that's there too, if you've had whatever kind of day that you've had. And letting yourself just experience being here. Feeling how your arms are resting in your lap, or clasped together, or along your sides. And when you're ready, finding breath, wherever that is easiest for you to sense breath directly as a physical sensation. Your stomach, or your chest, or your throat, or your nostrils. In all these meditations, as we teach them in MBSR, we don't try to change the breath in any particular way, it's just noticing how it is right now. Actually feeling the movement of breath. And knowing that if other things come up, or thoughts come up, or any narrative about the day, or what's going to happen, or what's happening now, analysis. You just let that be. You're not pushing it away, and gently but firmly coming back to sensation of breath. The topic tonight is kindness and compassion, so you might see if you can recall a time when somebody did a kind act towards you for you, and you hadn't expected it. It might have been a surprise. Or if it wasn't a surprise, just recalling a time when somebody was kind to you. Could have been a family member or a colleague or a friend, or maybe even somebody you didn't know personally, who out of the blue just did something you didn't anticipate they were going to do that was out of kindness for you. And if you can recall an event like that where someone was kind to you, remembering and recalling now how it felt to have that happen. You might recall a time when it worked the other way, where maybe without you even planning it, or it could have been some planning involved, but when you did something for somebody else, you did that without thought, without a big plan about it. It just felt natural to do. Could have been with a loved one who was injured or with an illness or needed support. And you discovered that the caring for them was easy. I mean, maybe there was certain obstacles in terms of manifesting the caring, but the decision to do it wasn't hard. Of course you would do this for your loved one or your friend. Or maybe you even did it for someone you didn't know well. Or it just sort of happened. You just did it without thinking. And you might see if you can recall what kind of a reaction you got from them about you extending yourself for them. You weren't looking for praise or acknowledgement, but because you just did it because it just felt like the right thing to do, but you could feel the appreciation. And you could know, and even you might even feel a little bit of it now, how it felt to be in a place and a time where you could give of yourself without there being some big objective in mind. It just seemed like the right thing to do. And you might also recall a time when, after you had done it, you realized that what you had said to somebody or done to somebody wasn't kind. You hadn't taken into account their feelings, and there was some regret about it. But it was difficult to undo once it's done. I can think of family members for which that's true. Times have expressed something that was not kind or not thoughtful. And the regret that happens after that. And that even now, as you recall that, you may, because you're remembering it now after some time, that there was a lesson in it. I can think of a particular instance with my youngest brother, where to this day I regret what I did. A certain way that I overlooked him totally. But that's a lesson I've never forgotten. And I'd like to think I act differently now in some situations because of that experience. And if there's more to work on with that, we have time during the rest of the meditation to come back to that if you like, if there's any unfinished business there. But recognizing that at that time, you're doing the best you could possibly do with what you knew at the time, what your situation was, and what your personal history was, what your experiences had been before that. Which is actually true of everybody. And we'll end the guided part of this meditation with recalling a time when you felt just totally accepted for who you are. People didn't expect anything, weren't making any demands of you to do anything different than you normally would do. They just, maybe they just like being in your company. You didn't have to do anything to merit that. That could be in the presence of a loved one or family member or a good friend. Or you could totally be yourself. Or even if you did something that wasn't particularly skillful, the people around you understood. They knew who you really were. They know who you are. Maybe at times and situations where you could even be a little bit goofy, and it's okay. or where you can be totally silent and nobody needs you to speak or say anything. Or you can talk without worrying about what people think. The rest of the meditation will be silent. You can either continue on with this theme or have it be a breath meditation or whatever kind of meditation you like to make it. This is your time.